Good morning, everyone. It's a pleasure to welcome you to the next Construction Buzz webinar. I'm Boganka from the Construction Buzz team. We are delighted to welcome Anita Phagura for today's session, where we'll be exploring coaching as a transformational tool that can support women to achieve career successes within the construction industry. But before we kick off today's session and introduce our speaker to you, I would like to kindly remind you that you can actively participate in the session by asking questions from Anita using the messaging function on the right side of your screen. Anita will answer these questions at the end of the session for you. And please also be aware that the recording of today's webinar will be made available to you after the session is completed. And now on to our speaker of the day. Today's discussion will be led by Anita Phagura, who supports construction organizations to embed diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging at all levels of managing and leading projects so that companies can address their gender and ethnicity pay gaps, retain and promote diverse talent, and enhance safety cultures. Anita is an inclusion specialist, accredited coach, and master's qualified project manager with over a decade of experience in the construction and railway industry. And in 2023, Anita was awarded as an inspiration businesswoman in STEM construction at the House of Lords. And with that being said, I am now handing over to Anita to start today's presentation. Welcome, Anita.
Thank you so much. So welcome everybody to our session today, looking at breaking barriers, how coaching revolutionises women's success in construction. Today, I'm going to share with you my exact 5-step process that I developed and use with coaching women in the industry. It supports them to achieve success in their projects and in their career on their terms, whilst navigating the environments that they're in. This has led to outcomes, including increased confidence when tackling new senior roles that have felt well out of that person's depth when they first started, feeling a lot more in control of their careers, promotions into leadership and into more senior leadership roles, securing high-profile project opportunities, and improved project delivery. It's also helped my clients, women within the industry, to deal with challenging periods, and ultimately it's helped them thrive and be fulfilled in their careers. For organisations, coaching and leadership development targeted specifically for women is an intervention that helps them close the gender pay gap. It helps build their talent and leadership pipeline. It helps improve engagement and retention, and it improves project delivery. So over the course of today, we'll go through lots of things. It's a jam-packed webinar today. We'll look at case studies of women who have gone through this process. We'll look at key parts of the framework, the 5 steps that I will outline for you, and this framework that I've developed and use with my clients. It has been specifically tailored and built with women within our industry in mind and those from marginalised communities. We'll specifically look at the needs of women with diverse identities, including those that are marginalised and racialised, and how this coaching framework is considerate of that. So by the end of the next hour or so that we have together, we are going to be able to help you know how you can do better to unlock the potential of women in your organisation so that they are thriving at work, no matter the size and scale of your organisation. As you'll see, the framework can be applied to individuals as coaching clients, but it can also be applied to groups and group coaching settings. There will be time for question and answers towards the end of our session as well, but if you have any as we go, please do add them to the chat. So a statistic that was shared ahead of this webinar is that only 15% of the construction industry are women. A lot of us within the industry will not necessarily be surprised by that statistic, and it slightly varies depending on the source of the information that you get. But what is quite consistent is that the figure is around 15%, and that hasn't changed significantly over the past decade or so. So there is a real challenge around attraction of women in our industry. And another recent study that has been shared is that when women across different industries were asked if construction industry was more inclusive, would that be an industry that you'd be interested in working in? There was a lot of people that said, I would consider that. But right now, there are a lot of people who don't see that construction is for them. As an industry, we focus a lot of time, energy, and initiatives in the area of attracting women into construction. And yet, these figures aren't significantly moving. And certainly when we look at leadership positions, again, the numbers aren't significantly moving. There is a shift, the shift is happening, but we're still far from having gender balance within our industry. And with that, with this male-dominated industry, that is sometimes slow to change, there comes challenges with that. So we spend a lot of time and effort as an industry, and quite rightly, we've got skill shortages. We really need to address having more diversity within our industry. We spend time and energy on attraction. However, something that I see that hasn't been given quite as much attention is what we're doing with women when they come into our industry, the women that we already have. So here's a non-construction comic, just to paint the picture of being the only woman in the room, being the woman who is going for that role, perhaps new into a company, perhaps for a more senior position. And it's a bit tongue-in-cheek. We've got a woman who has medium skin tone facing a whole raft of men with a very fair skin tone, and they are asking her, describe what you bring to this company, not seeing that in herself, being there, she's already adding difference and diversity. And by no means does this mean that we hire on identity characteristics, or that we should, but not necessarily recognizing the diverse talent that is in front of us. So with our industry perhaps not paying as much attention with the women that we have, and really focusing on engagement and retention, that is actually one of the big reasons that seems to be behind these statistics not significantly changing, despite more women being drawn into the industry, despite those initiatives to attract women in. We still have a problem with retaining the women that we have, and many of them leaving before they get into senior leadership. Sometimes that can be for a whole host of reasons. It can be lack of flexibility, it can be childcare or other caring responsibilities, and the lack of flexibility that often our industry can have. But it can also be women feeling stuck below their potential, not necessarily seeing the path upwards for promotions if that is what they are looking for. So there is work to be done and barriers to be broken down. Back 5 years ago, I was kicking off my business, my bespoke consultancy within the inclusion space, from a career within railway construction. And to do that, I made sure I was really understanding what barriers women were facing in the industry and across male-dominated industry and project environments. So I spoke to 100 women, and the barriers that they told me about, they were common themes that kept coming up. They said that they often felt like they were not being taken seriously, that they were treated as if they were more junior than they were. They were often feeling like they were not being heard and not having fair access to opportunities. So the same barriers kept coming up time and time again. But when women were telling me about their ambitions and their aspirations, they were absolutely sky high. Sometimes that was climbing within the corporate ladder or the hierarchy within organizations. So there wasn't necessarily an appetite for women not wanting to be in those senior leadership roles, but it was also about delivering great projects. It was about delivering different types of projects and having different opportunities within our industry. This industry has so many facets that is absolutely possible to give. So recognizing these areas and doing deeper research into women's leadership and often the barriers that are facing women getting into those senior roles, I developed a coaching framework, which I'm going to share with you. And you'll think, and you may think, well, why do we need coaching frameworks that are specific for women? And actually, when I talk you through it, you will perhaps recognize that actually these steps they might work for everybody. And the secret is that they do. It does work for mixed gender groups, and I have worked with mixed gender groups and used this very framework. However, it is built and centered on the needs and experiences of women in these environments, in these male-dominated industries. And it's also centered on those with multiple marginalized identities. And what that means is actually it works for everybody, but it works for those groups in particular, and it meets their needs amongst the barriers that they are facing. And so I'm introducing now my framework to you. This is a 5-step framework. It starts with acknowledging strengths. We will then see that it goes into an element called ask, which is about really understanding individuals' ask, what they are trying to achieve in their career, their wants and their needs. We look at ascending the obstacles that are there, so we are not ignoring the very real obstacles that are out there, as well as those ones that are internalized or are fears or are limiting beliefs that are internalized. And we look at, well, what can be done to alleviate or accept these obstacles? What can we actually remove out of the way? What can we accept? And what can we ascend? So we look at what's in and out of control for that individual. And ultimately, it's based on action taking, but we really need to do the other steps to understand what action that individual can take to achieve career success in a way that works for them. When it comes to career and leadership development, a lot of us are taught that doing a good job alone will be enough for people to achieve the career outcomes that they want. A lot of times, programs geared towards women in terms of coaching and leadership development, sometimes they can have a message that it's to fix women. I mean, they don't necessarily say it, but the messaging can be about how to lead in a certain mold and what professionalism looks like. But that's being done in the mold of the leaders that we already have. A framework like this, it really centers on individual experiences. It centers on what that person wants to achieve and also what they're really good at and what they can be known for, and helping them, and it comes with a whole heap of extra things. But it really goes beyond doing a good job or fixing women. It's meeting women in where they are and helping them get to that next step, but also really recognizing that they are navigating these obstacles. And as we've said, some of them are really real and structural and systemic, and some of those are perhaps more internalized, but we can recognize that. Otherwise, the messaging around coaching and leadership programs, sometimes they can be, you can do anything. And although we need that hope and optimism and aspiration, there's a risk that they are damaging when we don't recognize those very real obstacles that are there. So today we're going to go through this framework in a lot more detail. One of my clients, Vicky, she introduced me to the phrase standing strong in my own shoes. It's a Dutch phrase, she tells me, And she said that the coaching experience, going through that framework, working through it to get, supporting her to work through it in a way that worked for her, really helped her to stand strong in her own shoes. And for me, that is a lasting metaphor that I just love to introduce to people when we talk about the power of coaching that is possible. So whilst I've said there are very real barriers that women are navigating, what this can often lead to, and we hear things like microaggressions, we hear things around toxic cultures, lack of flexibility within our industries, unfortunately are far too commonplace. What this can lead to is confidence being knocked. And I always hate to say that women are less confident, because ultimately I don't believe that's true. Women are very confident, but we also have very real scenarios that are eroding that confidence. And in my coaching practice with many women within our industry, those experiences within the industry that unfortunately are leading to a lot of women leaving the industry or staying stuck below their potential is often these past experiences have led to fears or led to limiting beliefs that have become internalized. Or sometimes it's just not knowing the path, having an ambition and an aspiration, but not knowing how to get there. So sometimes, and this was my personal experience for a time working in railway construction, when I couldn't see the path myself, I just gave up. I thought, I don't know how to do it anymore, so I will take a step back in my career. And from the point that I felt ready to apply from that promotion to the point that I did, I realised 5 years had passed in between, because of the environment and the situations that I'd been in had led to me, in a way, giving up on my career and the aspirations and ambitions that I had. And for me personally, and Vicky's experience, it helped regain that ambition, that fire, that aspiration. It was always there, brewing underneath, and the coaching really helped unlock it and give that path of how to get there. And that really is what this framework is about, and what it is giving women, which I absolutely love. So the first step really is about acknowledging strengths. And oftentimes, particularly women, are not necessarily acknowledging the things that they are really great at. And there's a whole lot of reasons that go around that. It can be that often as an industry, actually, and a wider society, that we focus on what we can do better. We're focusing on critical feedback, and that critical feedback definitely has a place, and we do need to acknowledge those areas we can do better at, particularly when they are essential to doing our jobs, or that they are areas that we are perhaps weak at, but when we acknowledge our strengths, we can also recognize that there are some areas that are not our strength, and we can fill those gaps in other ways. And so that might be, for instance, using other people, calling on other people within our team who have different strengths to us. But when we acknowledge our strengths, and the coaching clients that I work with, when they acknowledge their strengths, they can really tap into those areas that they're good at. So, and it seems like it should be an easy thing to do. However, oftentimes when people are good at something, it comes easily to them. And so they aren't necessarily thinking about how to, they're not necessarily thinking that is a strength, because they're like, well, anyone could do that. I mean, it's an easy thing, and not necessarily recognizing that for some people, that is a lot harder. And when we are working in our strengths, that actually brings a lot more joy and fulfillment. And when we really, really build those strengths up, then we can be known for those things that we're really good at. And we can be doing more work that is fulfilling and giving us joy, that's easy to us, but also that we're building and we're actually becoming experts in. So for me, it's a real critical area, and particularly when I'm working with women and those from marginalized groups and racialized women, there's often that not recognizing fully their depths of strengths. There's been so much focus on the negative, so much focus on what they're not good at, or the areas of perhaps weakness, or the critical feedback that they've received, that's also another thing that could stop them applying for those roles, because they're not necessarily seeing and being able to share those strengths that they do have. So it's such a fundamental area and so impactful. A client of mine, Lexi, when she started working with me, she self-admits that she was in a real stagnant place within her career. She was feeling quite low and she'd lost the love of projects. And we've spoken about some of those examples earlier. But for Lexi, the coaching experience, and in particular, focusing on the areas of strength that she had, spending her time and energy there, and really tapping into those things that were great for her, that she was great at and she could build on, really helped her to reignite her love for the job that she was doing, and also make sure, and it was really important to her that the work she was doing was fulfilling and aligned to her values. So for Lexi, it was such a pivotal, transformational period that really helped her through acknowledging her strengths. And since our coaching together, she has carried on building on those areas. She's been able to try different roles, to experiment as well, having that openness. These stories are real examples, case studies of how these different areas of coaching can make a difference. So we've spoken about this, well, I've introduced this second area about ask, and this is really around the coaching client tapping into what do they really want in their career, what do they really need in their career. As well as in their career, of course, there is an overlap of what do they want and need in their life and how does their career fit into that. We've already touched on values, but that is a big piece of this. Tapping into those values, those areas of alignment, those areas that we really are passionate about. That is a real need that often goes under-recognized. But if we are able to tap into that through our work, again, we are more fulfilled and more in enjoyment with our work. But we can also then create those opportunities that tap into our wants and needs and values more. Oftentimes, we are so deep in the day job, the women that I work with, particularly within the construction industry, it's such an intense industry, they're not given that time and space to think about, well, what do they actually want and need in their career? And sometimes that is climbing to the next senior role. Sometimes that's moving sideways. Sometimes it's moving into a different project opportunity. But given that time and space to recognize what are my values, what do I want, what do I need, what am I aiming for, what do I want to achieve through my work, what impact do I want to create, what's my vision, what's the legacy I want to leave. These are incredibly powerful questions, and they help the individual steer their career, take back that ownership, and know where they want their career to be heading. So an element of ask and understanding an individual's ask is also to ask for what they want and need. Tell other people, tell if that's appropriate, whether that's your line manager, tell people within your company. We've been building those strengths, we've been recognizing where we want to go in our career, and now we can start telling people, because once we start connecting those dots, those opportunities are more likely to connect to us and those individuals. And that is what I'm seeing in my coaching clients and have been seeing over the past 5 years. So Nisha's story was that the coaching experience, it really helped her to dream bigger, dream a little more. She had been in a role and she'd come up against a lot of brick walls, as often women do within our industry, unfortunately. But she started to see that there was hope and there were these dreams, and that she didn't have to put herself in a box. There was so much more possibility out there that was within her reach, and it was possible. So through the process, it really built her confidence. Having Nisha was part of a group program, so connecting with other women on the program, it gave her that support group, and it gave her the ability to apply her skills and vision to create what she wanted to in her work and life. She describes being that fierce project manager, which is somebody who's just showing up and changing the perceptions of how leadership is in construction organisations, in male-dominated industry. She was showing up as a female leader in an authentic way that worked for her. And she was an effective leader as she was doing that. And as she says, Nisha was a happier and more engaged employee. From feeling like she was coming up against those brick walls, it had completely transformed for Nisha. And some of the results were for her as well, that she was doing some really high profile projects and she was getting known for those things that she was good at. So the next two areas of the framework, I'm going to share them together because they are interrelated, is to ascend obstacles. So we've spoken about these very real obstacles that are in our environment, but also there's how that turns into limiting beliefs and fears. Another area that goes hand in hand in that is understanding what's in and out of control. So understanding what an individual can alleviate, like what barriers are there that they can actually remove? What are the barriers that are there that are not within their control? Perhaps they have to accept it, or perhaps they can ascend it and get over that obstacle. That might be because it is an internalized obstacle, or perhaps they can use their strengths and skills to overcome it, or perhaps they can ask for help and support. So we're building a roadmap here, and it's really with the foundations of the individual, what they're good at, recognizing where they are in their career and where they want to go and what could stop them. So often when I'm working with women, we've already spoken about confidence. That's one thing that comes up oftentimes, but there are often also fears that stop women from stepping out of their comfort zone. And there are lots of different versions that come up, but there are some reoccurring themes that come up. Often there is this it's this perfectionism, feeling like they need to be perfect before they can do the next thing. We often speak about imposter syndrome, which you may have come across. But with imposter syndrome, it can be the thing that makes us feel that we are out of our depths. We will get found out. I very much buy into the school of thought that imposter syndrome is a symptom of our society, is a symptom of our workplaces and the cultures that we have been part of that lead to the internalizing of this imposter. And it's found to be more likely in those that are often underrepresented. They are often the only one in the room. That feeling of being that imposter is more likely because nobody else in the room looks like us. We haven't got the role models. So if we get found out as if we are not good enough and we get found out, then actually there are consequences of that. And some of that it can be imagined or internalized, but also there can be quite real consequences of that. Women stepping into senior roles, sometimes there are studies that show that they're often given poison chalice projects, those really difficult, challenging projects that are set up to fail. And so if they do fail, then that then becomes a reflection of them and a reflection of women leadership. So unfortunately, again, we have these really real obstacles that then are becoming internalized. And that can stop women from going for these opportunities in the first place. And when they do, they can really feel out of their depth. Often, not all the time, but they can feel out of their depth and paralyzed in fear or inaction. There are studies that have been done that also show that men suffer imposter syndrome. It's not just a phenomenon that is specific to women, but as we've said, there are cases where it's more likely. But it also shows up in different ways. So for men, the imposter syndrome is often alleviated when they go for a role. They might be feeling that imposter syndrome. It's far out of their reach, but they go for it anyway. And then if they get the role, or if they've gone for it and they get to the next stage, then they feel validated, the studies show, and that imposter syndrome subsides. Somebody else has validated that I was good enough for this role, and therefore I'm not an imposter anymore. However, the studies also show that for women, it's really stopping them going for that opportunity in the first place. They're not putting themselves out there. And if they do, that imposter syndrome doesn't necessarily go away. And as we've said, that they might also in practice be held to more critical, higher standards. So I'm going to introduce you now to another client of mine, Liz, and this is an interview that we did. The case study is available on LinkedIn and also my YouTube channel, which you can find at Anita Phagura if you want to see the longer case study. But Liz is a real phenomenal woman within our industry. She is working at a very senior strategic level, and very much by the design of her own career, she has really taken that control back and designed the career that works for her. And in this particular clip, Liz speaks about why she started coaching in the first place, and some of those obstacles and boundaries and areas of control that she has grappled with, and how coaching has helped her overcome those areas. So it's a video clip that's about just over 4 minutes long. So I'm going to introduce Liz to you now, and do follow her on LinkedIn. She is very phenomenal. What triggered in you the need for coaching at that point?
So as I said, I've done coaching a couple of times in my career, and the first time was about sort of 10 years ago, and I was feeling very stressed at work. Basically, I felt kind of out of control of what I was doing, and yeah, it was leading to a lot of kind of stress and that kind of like all the things that go with that, not wanting to go to work on a Monday morning, you know, feeling stressed at the weekend, carrying it with me all the time. And one of the things that I realised, which hadn't occurred to me at all, was that it wasn't that I was overstretched, it was actually that I was understretched. And actually I was being held down in a role that was too junior for me, and I wasn't in control of my own working day, and not just from a time perspective, but the actual activities that I was doing day to day were being dictated by others. And the limiting belief there for me was that I wasn't senior enough to be making those decisions, but my gut was like literally telling me the opposite. So coaching at that stage really helped me to understand that I actually needed to step up and to get out of the control of others and take more control over what I was doing. And that was really the start of the journey. It did not happen overnight. You know, it was. I think over the following 10 years, it was still something that I've kind of struggled with, always to kind of feel confident and step forward into the role that I kind of knew I was capable of. But also with this kind of constant sort of slight fear that if I did that, if I stepped forward and I put myself forward, I was actually exposing myself to more stress and to more scrutiny and to a job that I wasn't going to be able to cope with, and that was actually going to feel even more uncomfortable than I was before. And I think when you and I started coaching together, that was still a fear that I was holding on to. So I just stepped out of a fairly senior role, which wasn't working out for me. And I was really scared about what I was going to do next, because I was like, I know I don't want to do a junior job where I'm going to be held back. I know that that's not where I'm at in my career. I want to do something where I can feel in control of my my work. I can have influence. I can use all this great experience I've got. I know I've got the skills, but also that is going to be controllable from a kind of stress and working day kind of perspective. And that felt at that point like a kind of impossible thing to ask for. You know, how can I have all of those things at once? How can I have a senior level job where I'm not stressed, and where I have control, and it fits into the other things that I want to do in my life, and have all of that and make it work. And it felt like an impossible ask, basically. And I think through our conversations, one of the things that you helped me to see is that actually, if I don't ask for it, then it's not going to happen. And actually, it is my life. You know, I don't owe anything to anybody else. I have to kind of make it work for me. So that was very much what I came into our conversations with, was kind of how do I kind of get that kind of role where I'm gonna use all my skills and do what I want to do, but I'm not going to kind of get the massive load of baggage of stress that goes with it. And part of that was about understanding what value I add in my job, basically, and also recognising what I don't need to do. And this is something else that I know we've talked about a lot, which is about setting boundaries about what you do and don't do. And this particular set of boundaries is around not diving into the things that I don't need to be involved in, and actually keeping myself at a place where I can add value, and be a good, strong member of the team, but not dive into all the other things that I don't need to dive into. And I think sometimes, you know, we want to feel like we're in control of everything, and I think letting go a little bit of that control that I wanted to feel over other people, which is probably what was happening to me 10 years ago, was a really kind of good realization that actually, you know, you can't control everything. You need to just kind of do what you can, and then that actually kind of releases you to really focus on the things that matter and that you can really contribute to without worrying about everything else.
What triggered in you the need for coaching at that point? So with Liz's story, we can really see how all of these elements of the framework have supported Liz to achieve her designing and implementing a career of her choice by design in a way that means success for her. And she's brought out some of those obstacles and those elements of control that she has had to overcome or have a shift in her thinking to achieve. And a real credit to Liz for and the other case studies that we've been exploring to actually go through the process of coaching, but implementing that into action, because coaching itself, it can often be painted as this thing that is quite soft, but actually coaching process can be very challenging for individuals. You're coming up and confronting sometimes quite personal things from experiences that have led to this point, as well as where you are now, and that can be a really vulnerable experience. So there's a real credit to the coaching clients who go through this process, but they don't do it because it's I mean, it can be a fun process as well, but they don't do it just because, but they're doing it with a purpose in mind. They're getting to know themselves better so that they can achieve the career that they're aiming for, and they do this with building that purpose and taking it, and ultimately it's about leading into action to make these things into the reality more than just those dreams that we have spoken about. And so I'm going to tell so the action taken, of course, is quite self-evident. It's about, we know this now, we know what we know there are obstacles to overcome, we can create the path of how to do that, and it's actually doing the things. And Karen coached with me a couple of years ago, and as she says, she still uses those tools and techniques today. But for her, it really helped her to build that, that personal and professional life that she really wanted. And she had to take the action to do that. And even when it was challenging, even when it wasn't easy, but she followed through, but also in a time frame that was right for her. So certainly with coaching, sometimes we can get these light bulb moments, but it can actually still take time after the coaching period for those to then be, for individuals to be ready for action. But as we've said, those tools and techniques, as well as those light bulbs and revelations, they're laying the seeds and the foundations for that future action taken, even if that action taken isn't right now, when we're looking at a longer term building of the career. But also there are still those seeds being planted and those everyday actions that are moving that person closer to that direction. And for the organisation, as we've said, they are getting the benefits whilst this is happening, because that greater acknowledgement of what we're good at, where we're going with our career, and also oftentimes we, as well as coaching on the wider career development, there are elements of the projects that come in, particularly when we're looking at strengths and where people want to go in their career. How do they get there? Sometimes they can be the technical elements as well. So they are building out and taking the action in the meantime as well, and that is having a tangible impact on projects as well as the individual and as well as the talent pipeline within organizations. And so all of this is our 5-step framework that we've spoken about, and this is the process. And as we can see, all of these steps, although they're independent of each other, they also tie together. There are additional elements to the framework that I use, which is looking at skills that can be developed that really support women in particular, and those from marginalised group, from moving beyond doing a good technical job. That still needs to be done, of course, but all of those things that are beyond that are soft skills. They're called soft, even though they're not necessarily easy, but they contribute to doing more than a good job, but getting known for what you're good at, connecting you to the opportunities, getting heard, getting taken seriously, overcoming those barriers that women are experiencing at work. And in terms of what they individually can control to achieve that, I'm very much a proponent that coaching is a real strong transformational tool for women within our industry, and it revolutionises their career success outcomes. However, I'm also a big proponent that this isn't the only intervention that we use, and that within organisations we're not putting it on women to fix the problem and to overcome the challenges themselves, but it's really important that they are supported through this process, and that those barriers that we've spoken about, they're also addressed at an organisational level. But women, we can't wait for all of those things to happen for us to be able to take those career steps that we need to as well. So these things need to happen in tandem and together. And really foundational to this is about taking intersectional approaches. I've outlined the framework to you. I've touched on that there are additional skills, but sometimes with coaching and leadership development programs, without the nuance, they can be geared towards women holistically, and that often misses the needs of those from marginalised groups and who are racialised. If I give you an example of this, we often talk about authentic leadership, which is a skill within the framework that I implement with my clients. But the experience of authentic leadership is very different depending on whether you are racialised or whether you are not. And then, of course, there are differences within the people that are racialised as well. Again, that can apply when people are neurodivergent and they feel they have to mask at work. It can apply to those who are from the LGBT LGBTQ+ community who don't feel that they can be authentic or be out about their personal life at work. And in all of those cases, at least part of that can be down to the risk and the safety of being open and authentic. So when we take these blanket approaches, it can be quite risky for us just to say, be authentic. We need to take that nuanced approach. And in the case of authentic leadership, we need to recognize the vulnerabilities, the risks, the safety implications, and support those that are marginalized to find their path, to navigate the barriers and the obstacles with that in a way that works for them, but understanding that bigger picture. And one of my wonderful clients, Colville, she very much was coming to terms with that real belief and confidence in herself. As we've spoken about, like, a lot of things had been internalized. She'd been in an organization for 13 years. She was feeling like she was working below her potential, and she didn't know that path forward. And so she didn't know. So she had stayed in that role for longer than she felt comfortable to do, and she felt like she was working below her potential, and she could see the barriers around sexism and also racism within that were structural barriers and systemic barriers too. And we, through the coaching, we aren't overcoming those organizational barriers within individual one-to-one coaching or group coaching of women, but we're supporting those to navigate the path. And for Colville, that belief really grew, that confidence, that stepping into her potential. And she was so proud that actually she was able to put herself forward for new projects, really high visibility projects, and build that confidence as she went. She didn't have to get it perfect right away. She could build that confidence. She got known by the CEO in this organization who she didn't have a relationship with before. And for her, was really critical was about undoing a lot of the cultural conditioning to allow herself to get that balance of her British, Punjabi, Sikh identity and all the identities that come with that, and in a personal life and in a work life. So understanding the culture that individuals are coming from can be really important, and within our intersectional approaches to coaching. And that's just one example. And it doesn't mean that we always need a shared identity with our coach, but also that can be really important. And certainly having a coach who understands those barriers that are in the society and the workplace, so that there is that shared knowledge, and you don't have to feel like you have to justify or explain and spend your coaching experience teaching the coach about some underlying barriers that are out there. It's really about supporting the individual to navigate those. So when do we implement coaching? There are so many times that we can do this, but it's really often at the time of transition. So it can be it can be for leaders at every layer of their career, but in particular, the times that I see it's really impactful is when women are moving in, are aspiring leaders, or when they're getting to a new level of their career. That can be going into a much more senior role or strategic role. It's also the times when they need additional support and growth. So it can be when they're going through challenging times, but it can also be when they want to develop their personal growth and build their project competencies as well. And those transition periods, often when we're coming back from parental leave, and also organizational restructures and periods of transition in wider society as well. These are really impactful times to implement coaching. And so this wider framework is really impactful, and we've seen lots of transformations in women that I've been coaching through both individual programs and group programs. But for organizations, there are so many returns, and we've spoken about this, but it often is really helping to build that pipeline. And the coaching programs to be implemented effectively, they also need that organisational support around them. So I've developed a new workbook that helps organisations to really maximise their return on investment when they do invest in leadership development coaching, whether that's for individuals or in terms of group programs. What can the organisation do to actually get that return, actually support women into leadership if that is the goal, and also how part of that is absolutely about those intersectional approaches that we spoke about, how they can meet the needs of women with diverse marginalised identities. So I have a workbook, and if you would like a copy of that workbook, please do email me, or you can use that link there. If you write it down, I'll copy and paste it, and then you can book a call with me and have access to our workbook. As I've said, the implementing coaching frameworks, they can be very powerful, and we have lots of successful outcomes in organizations where the coaching program and process has led to them achieving their targets, if they have numerical targets, around getting women into more senior leadership positions. So coaching is a huge tool that can revolutionize women's success. It's certainly not the only tool, and we need to back it up with inclusive leadership and some structural and changes within the organization. But it's also a really effective tool that supports women. It gives them community, and it recognizes the particular barriers and challenges that they are facing within our industry and that they are facing personally. So it leaves me to thank you and open up for questions.
Hi, Anita. We do have questions. I would like to put them to you now. The first one is from Catherine. Catherine is asking, do you think that in the main, that as women tend to be in the main care provider, if they have a family, that the industry still isn't geared with the flexibility to support this? And this is an issue with the retention, especially around that age group.
Yeah, it absolutely is still a really big problem. I think there is a shift that's happening, particularly as a result of the pandemic in certain parts of the industry, where there is more openness to caring responsibilities, regardless of gender, and that's a wonderful shift. However, there is still real challenges around that flexibility, and there is a whole piece to be done within organisations around that. But just bringing us back to the topic today, one of the things that coaching can give is we can look at, not necessarily the balance, because I hate that word, but we can look at how those with caring responsibilities deal with the challenge and the boundaries of showing up in their work and also showing up in their life in the way that they want to. So coaching can be a powerful tool to help you navigate that, but certainly it's not the answer solely, and it's not in place of that flexibility not being available within organisations.
Thank you so much. Can you please also elaborate on what is a soft skill? Yeah,
so soft skills are often the skills that are not technical to do our job. So in terms of project management, some of the technical skills may be around cost and cost forecasting or scheduling or how to lead, so they're more about the technical skills. But the soft skills are often more around the leadership skills. They're more around the how do we, they're more around the how rather than the technical details of the job. And so that's an area that we address, because often we're really encouraged to focus on those technical skills, and those softer skills can be missed in some areas, and in particular areas that can be quite critical to critical to career development. And so gave the example of authentic leadership as a soft skill.
Thank you, Anita. And we still have one more question. Can you please maybe elaborate on like how does the coaching framework address basically the potential biases and stereotypes that women may encounter in this industry that's very much male dominated, and how does it empower them to navigate these challenges and also overcome?
Yeah, that's a really great question. So there is a whole lot of work that I do that is around inclusive leadership that isn't within the context of this. So there is absolutely work to be done in organizations of reducing those stereotypes and bias and the impact of those. But in terms of supporting women and those that are marginalized or racialized to navigate those biases and navigate those microaggressions or those words that come to us, or those stereotypes and biases, coaching can help recognize what has become internalized, but also it can help recognize those external stereotypes and biases. And then we can start to unpick them, or we can recognize them and decide what to do with them. So if I give you an example, I was working with one of my clients, one of the women that I was working with, and this is a common one, but actually some of the language that was being given in feedback to her was leading to her question how she was showing up at work, how she was showing up as a leader. And that feedback, she was able to, through coaching, assess that critically, assess where that was coming from, and not give it the weight and the power that she would have done previously. So she was able to recognize that for what it is, and then say, okay, that's feedback that I don't have to take, and there are other things that I can do, and therefore it led to less questioning of herself, and then that could impact her next actions.
Thank you, Anita. We got one more question. We still have time for one more. Kavita is asking, what are the key skills that are expected out of women to be involved and participate in the construction industry?
That's a really great question. So as we've said, we've often give real focus on technical skills, and that's different depending on the actual role that you are doing. But I think some of the skills that are really important are those that go beyond the technical skills, as we've spoken about. And there are some things like authentic leadership as an example, and that is backed by things like values that we've touched on, is backed by things like empathy, it's vulnerability. And that's a real powerful skill to show up in the workplace, as we've spoken about, in a way that works for that individual, because you don't have to share everything about yourself in a way that exposes you. Leading is also really powerful for leading others, because you can bring people with you when they see that you are showing up in a way that is genuine, it's real, it's backed by other skills such as relationship building, is backed by and that I think those are just two examples of some really powerful skills that are part of my framework as well, that we've touched on, but they are really important, particularly within our industries, because it can actually be really difficult to show up in these ways, but when we find our path to do that, we are much more fulfilled, and also we're doing great work. And with that relationship building piece, we are building our communities, we're building our network of support, which is so essential for us to do our jobs well, in a technical sense, but also in terms of career and development opportunities.
Thank you so much, Anita. If you do have any more questions, please do send them to Anita. I'm sure that she will be happy to answer them to you. With that being said, I would like to thank everyone for joining us for this session this morning. It was a very important conversation, and thank you so much to Anita as well for all of her insights. We trust that you've gained valuable knowledge from today's session. And if you will need a refresher, the recording will be sent out to you shortly, and will also be accessible accessible on the Construction Bus GoToWebinar channel. The link that Anita mentioned earlier on is still available in the chat, so you will have a chance to click on it and download and book a call with Anita as well. But thank you so much again. Enjoy the rest of your day, and thank you to Anita as well.
Thank you.
Bye-bye. Thank you. Bye-bye.